The air inside Forrester Creations felt heavy that afternoon, as though the walls themselves were bracing for another explosion. Hope Logan sat in her office, the edges of her patience fraying with every passing minute. For days, she had watched Steffi and Taylor glide through the chaos surrounding Luna's case with a sense of untouchable calm, as if morality were something they could selectively apply. She had bitten her tongue through meeting after meeting, listening to Ridge pontificate about family unity and professional ethics, while knowing that the greatest betrayal was happening right beneath their noses. Hope had been told all her life that silence preserved peace. But peace, she realized, had become a lie, a mask stretched over the rot. And when the truth began to press against her ribs like something alive, she could no longer hold it in. Her voice shook when she confronted Steffi, not out of fear, but from the tremor of anger that comes when conviction and heartbreak intertwine. She told her everything, the secret she had carried, the truth that could destroy the illusion of moral superiority the Forresters wore so proudly. Taylor Hayes, the celebrated psychiatrist, the matriarch of composure and righteousness, had crossed an unforgivable line. Her relationship with Deacon Sharp, once hidden under the guise of therapy, had become something far more intimate, far more dangerous. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was predatory, manipulative, and deeply personal. Hope's words hit like glass shattering against marble. At first, Steffi refused to believe her. Her mother was her moral compass, the embodiment of balance and strength. But as Hope continued, her voice steadying with the weight of truth, denial gave way to dread. Steffi could see the sincerity in Hope's eyes, the trembling pain of a daughter torn between loyalty and conscience. She saw, too, the calculation behind it, and that was what burned most. Hope had chosen this moment, the height of Luna's scandal, to unleash the revelation. It wasn't random. It was strategic, emotional, and devastatingly timed. Steffi's outrage came in waves. The first was directed at Deacon, a man she had never trusted, whose redemption arc had always felt too convenient. Then it turned toward Taylor, her own mother, the woman who had always preached boundaries and responsibility, who had lectured everyone about ethics while quietly violating them behind closed doors. But finally, the anger turned on Hope, who stood across from her with tears in her eyes, knowing full well that truth often kills the messenger first. The fallout was immediate and relentless. Rich heard about the confrontation before the day was over, and the moment he did, something ancient and bitter stirred in him. To him, this was not just a moral transgression, it was an opportunity. Ridge had always believed Deacon was poison to his family, a man whose very existence corrupted those he touched. Now, with proof of Taylor's involvement, he could finally draw the line between them with righteous certainty. He summoned the family for a meeting that evening, his voice sharp as steel when he told Brooke to bring Hope. The living room at the Forrester estate felt like a courtroom by the time they all gathered. Brooke sat in uneasy silence, watching her daughter brace herself against the storm. She could feel the divide forming, the Logans on one side, the Forresters on the other. She wanted to protect Hope, to soften the blow, but deep down she knew this was one of those moments that couldn't be undone. Hope had not just exposed a scandal, she had exposed the fragility of the alliance between their families. And that Ridge would not forgive. When Hope spoke again, she didn't sound defiant. She sounded exhausted. She told them how she had discovered the truth, how late-night visits, hushed conversations, and intercepted messages had pieced together a picture no one wanted to see. Taylor had blurred the line between therapy and affection with Deacon during his recovery period, using their sessions as a way to maintain control under the pretense of psychological support. It was a dangerous entanglement, and one that took root while Deacon was still under scrutiny for his involvement in Luna's fate, a woman whose life and death had become the center of everyone's grief and suspicion. Steffi rose from her chair, her expression trembling between fury and disbelief. "You waited until now," she demanded, "when everything is falling apart. When we're trying to recover from Luna's death, from the press, from everything that's tearing this family apart, you decided this was the time to destroy my mother?" Hope didn't answer. There was nothing she could say that would make the timing look anything but cruel. Thomas stepped in next, his voice low but venomous. He accused Hope of using moral righteousness as a weapon, of trying to bring the Forresters down from within. The irony of his words stung her. Thomas, of all people, judging her for deception. Brooke tried to speak, but Ridge's booming voice silenced everyone. He looked at Hope as though she were a stranger, someone who had violated an unspoken law of loyalty. "You had no right," he said. "Whatever Taylor did, it wasn't your secret to tell." But Hope did not flinch. "It became my secret," she said softly, "when it started hurting people. When it started bleeding into everything else." Her eyes darted toward Deacon, who stood in the corner, looking every bit the guilty man. He tried to speak, to explain, to confess, but Ridge shut him down with a glare. Taylor arrived moments later, her entrance marked by an awful quiet. She had already heard what was said, the whispers reaching her before the meeting even began. The eyes that turned toward her were full of judgment, disbelief, and sorrow. She didn't deny it. Instead, she sat down, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice raw. "Deacon was in a dark place. I thought I could help him. And somewhere along the line She stopped, unable to finish. For a brief second, the room softened. Taylor's vulnerability was disarming, her guilt palpable. But it did not erase the fact that she had crossed a sacred boundary. The family silence deepened into something more suffocating than anger, a collective disappointment that wrapped around her like chains. Ridge's reaction was cold, calculated. "You need help," he said finally, his tone stripped of affection. "But until you get it, I don't want you near my grandchildren." Those words broke Steffi more than anything else that night. To watch her mother fall from grace, to see her father weaponize love as punishment, it shattered something fundamental in her. And yet, beneath her heartbreak, there was a flicker of resentment toward Hope. Because no matter how justified the truth might have been, Steffi couldn't shake the feeling that Hope had done this not out of righteousness, but out of revenge. Revenge for every time the Forresters had made her feel small, for every judgment, every whispered slight. Hope had finally found her moment to strike, and she had chosen it well. In the days that followed, Hope became a ghost within both families. Brooke defended her publicly, but could not protect her from the quiet estrangement that grew behind closed doors. Ridge refused to speak to her. Thomas ignored her completely. Even Deacon, the man whose actions had set everything in motion, withdrew into shame. Steffi, meanwhile, spiraled between rage and sorrow, lashing out at her mother one moment and collapsing in guilt the next. She wanted to hate Hope, but every time she looked in the mirror, she saw her own hypocrisy staring back. The scandal consumed the press, of course. The story of Dr. Taylor Hayes, beloved psychiatrist, entangled with a man tied to criminal investigations, became tabloid gold. Forrester Creations scrambled to contain the narrative, but no spin could undo the damage. Ridge's leadership faltered under scrutiny. Eric's health declined amid the stress. And Brooke found herself standing once again in the ruins of another family war, wondering why honesty always seemed to destroy everything it touched. Hope tried to return to normalcy, but isolation became her new reality. Her colleagues at Hope for the Future whispered about her behind her back, wondering whether she'd gone too far. Her own brother, RJ, barely met her eyes. She found herself spending late nights alone in the office, staring at sketches of dresses that once symbolized renewal and light, but now felt hollow. In trying to cleanse the family of its secrets, she had become one herself, a walking reminder of betrayal. Yet deep within her, there was no regret. What she had done felt necessary, even if it had cost her everything. Someone had to break the illusion, to pull back the curtain on the hypocrisy that had defined both the Logans and the Forresters for decades. They built empires on appearances, on half-truths masquerading as virtue. Hope had simply refused to keep pretending. Meanwhile, Taylor sought refuge away from Los Angeles, entering a rehabilitation program disguised as a personal retreat. She sent no word to Steffi, no explanation beyond what was already known. Deacon tried to reach out, but she ignored him. He, too, had begun to see how their connection, whatever it had been, was rooted in guilt and need, not love. For a man already haunted by Luna's death, Taylor's scandal was one more wound he couldn't justify. Ridge, for his part, sank into his familiar role, the protector, the patriarch, the one who would restore order. But inside, he felt the hollowness of authority. He had used Taylor's mistake to reassert control, to punish Deacon, to divide the families once again, but what he had really achieved was emptiness. He had lost respect, trust, and perhaps even a woman who had once been his moral equal. And Steffi, caught between them all, began to unravel. She tried to keep the company running, to maintain the image of strength, but inside, she felt fractured. Her faith in her mother, in her family, in the entire notion of right and wrong, had crumbled. One night, alone in her house, she scrolled through old photos of her mother, Hope, and herself, 3 women eternally linked by blood, love, and betrayal. She realized, with quiet despair, that they were all versions of the same story, women who had tried to love men who destroyed them and families who demanded silence. By the time Hope stood before her mirror again, days later, she saw herself clearly for the first time. Not as the hero, not as the villain, but as something in between. The truth had set no one free. It had only revealed what they all were: human, flawed, terrified of losing control. She understood now that in this world, truth wasn't a weapon or a cure. It was a mirror, reflecting the very chaos it sought to end. Outside, the storm clouds over Los Angeles began to break. The rain washed over the Forrester estate, the Logan cabin, and even the dim lights of Il Giardino, where Deacon sat alone, nursing the remains of his past. Somewhere in the quiet, Taylor wept for the peace she could never reclaim. And Hope, standing in the doorway of her studio, whispered to herself words she once read in her mother's journal: "The truth doesn't destroy families. It only shows which ones were never whole to begin with." In that moment, she realized the cost of her honesty wasn't exile, it was freedom. The world she'd shattered had been an illusion all along, and though she stood in the ruins, she finally felt something she hadn't in years: the faint, painful pulse of her own conscience. The days that followed unfolded with a slow, punishing rhythm, as if time itself refused to let the Forresters and Logans heal. The revelation about Taylor and Deacon had not only torn families apart, but had also left a vacuum, an absence of trust that consumed everyone in its path. Hope found herself drifting through each day in quiet isolation, haunted not by regret, but by the emptiness that comes when the truth no longer feels like victory. The walls of Forrester Creations, once alive with creativity, now seemed to hum with unease. Conversation stopped when she entered a room, eyes lowered or flicked away. The same people who had once admired her courage now saw her as the destroyer of peace. Even her designs, once praised for their hopefulness and purity, were being quietly removed from the upcoming showcase. Steffi, meanwhile, existed in a blur of confusion and suppressed rage. Her nights were restless, her mind looping through the betrayal that had shattered her sense of family. She couldn't bring herself to visit Taylor, nor could she forgive Hope for the timing of her confession. But beneath the resentment lay something more complicated, an understanding she didn't want to admit. Hope had done what Steffi had never dared to do. She had forced the truth into the light, no matter the cost. It terrified Steffi to realize that, in some twisted way, she envied her. Ridge retreated into work, pretending that the chaos at home was beneath him. He had made the choice to distance Taylor from their grandchildren, and though the decision had seemed righteous at first, the loneliness it brought gnawed at him. Late at night, he found himself replaying moments of their past, her laughter, her unwavering belief in him, the way she had always seen the man beneath the ego. Yet now, every memory felt contaminated. He told himself he was protecting the family, but in truth, he was punishing her to ease his own wounded pride. Brooke tried to hold her family together, but even she was growing weary. Watching Hope unravel under the weight of judgment broke something inside her. She had seen this pattern too many times. Truth turned into a weapon, morality twisted into self-righteousness. Brooke visited her daughter one evening at the cabin, where the air was heavy with silence and old memories. Hope sat by the window, staring into the distance. Brooke tried to speak softly, but her words came out more like pleading. "You did what you thought was right," she said. "But doing the right thing doesn't always mean you'll be understood." Hope didn't look at her. "I don't think they'll ever forgive me," she murmured. And maybe they shouldn't. Brooke wanted to protest, but she couldn't. She could see the exhaustion in Hope's eyes, the kind that comes from carrying a burden no one else will share. As a mother, she ached to shield her, but as a woman, she understood. Truth, she knew, had always been both their salvation and their curse. Meanwhile, Deacon spiraled. His restaurant, Illinois Giardino, became his prison, filled with memories of laughter and betrayal. The scandal had cost him not only his dignity, but also his fragile relationship with Hope. He tried to call her, to explain, but she refused to answer. Every time he looked at the empty chair across from him, he saw Taylor's face, the regret, the tenderness, the mistakes they shared. It wasn't love that haunted him. It was the realization that he had ruined yet another woman's life. When Ridge appeared one night, unannounced, Deacon didn't even bother pretending civility. Ridge's voice was cold, almost surgical. "Stay away from my family," he said. Deacon simply nodded. "You don't have to tell me," he replied quietly. "They already have." Steffi, trying to reclaim control, focused on work. But Forrester Creations wasn't the refuge it once had been. The press had caught wind of Taylor's scandal, and whispers about the family's instability were everywhere. Investors grew cautious. The line between personal and professional had blurred beyond recognition. Thomas, ever the opportunist, tried to step into the leadership vacuum, but even his charm couldn't distract from the truth. He confronted Hope one afternoon in the design studio, his tone sharp and his eyes dark. "You didn't just destroy my mother," he said. "You destroyed all of us." Hope turned to him slowly, her voice calm but cutting. "No, Thomas. I told the truth. You all destroyed yourselves when you decided to live in lies." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Her words had hit their mark. Days turned into weeks, and still, the tension refused to fade. Then, one evening, as Steffi was leaving the office, she received a message, anonymous and signed, but unmistakably deliberate. It contained a photo. Taylor, standing on a cliffside somewhere along the Pacific, looking out at the water. Beneath it were the words, "You don't know everything." The message sent a chill through her. She drove to Ridge's house that night, demanding answers, but he knew nothing. The next day, she tracked the sender's number, only to find it untraceable. Brooke received a similar message days later, this one with a short video clip of Taylor speaking to someone off-camera. Her tone was calm, almost clinical. "They think I lost control," Taylor said. "But they never understood. Deacon wasn't my mistake, he was my patient. My last one." Then the clip ended. Brooke sat frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. It was impossible to tell if the video was new or old, genuine or edited, but the implication was clear. There was more to Taylor's story than anyone knew. The revelation spread quickly, reigniting every wound they thought had begun to heal. Steffi demanded to see her mother. Hope insisted the footage didn't change what Taylor had done. Ridge, for once, was silent, trapped between doubt and guilt. The family fractured all over again, caught between forgiveness and suspicion. Taylor eventually resurfaced, not in Los Angeles, but in a remote clinic in Montana. She reached out to Brooke first, asking for one final meeting. When Brooke arrived, she found a woman transformed, not broken, but eerily serene. Taylor explained that she had volunteered at the clinic, helping victims of trauma, trying to find redemption. "You can tell them whatever you want," she said softly. "But I'm done defending myself." Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "They still love you, Taylor," she said. "Even if they don't know how to show it." Taylor smiled faintly. Then let them love the version of me that's easier to forgive. When Brooke returned to Los Angeles, she told no one about what she'd seen. The truth, she realized, had already done enough damage. Some stories didn't need another chapter. They just needed to fade. But Hope couldn't forget. She visited her father one last time at Il Giardino. They sat across from each other, the silence between them filled with unspoken pain. "You should talk to her," Deacon said quietly. "Your mother. Your brother.
Steffi.
All of them. Don't let what I did define you." Hope looked down at her hands. "It's not what you did, Dad," she whispered. "It's what everyone else refused to do. See things for what they are." Outside, the city lights shimmered across the horizon. For the first time in months, Hope felt a strange peace, not because things were fixed, but because they were finally honest. She walked out of the restaurant and into the night, not knowing what the future held, only that she would no longer apologize for seeing the world as it was. Back at the cliffside in Montana, Taylor stood watching the sunset. The wind carried the faintest sound, a phone notification, a message unread. She didn't look at it.
She didn't need to.
The past, she knew, had a way of chasing everyone. But for now, she let it drift away with the tide, her silhouette swallowed by the fading light, as somewhere in Los Angeles, Hope Logan's quiet defiance became the beginning of a new story.